Welcome, everybody, to the Body, Soul, and Spirit podcast. We've been talking about toxic behaviors, and I'm so excited to be with you guys today on our last toxic behavior. And I hope that you have been challenged through that series of toxic behavior podcast as we become healthier and empower others, and we are empowered ourselves as we try to move in a direction that is a healthier version of ourselves. We talked about manipulation, we talked about gaslighting, constant criticism, and we're going to talk about one last one. There's a lot more, but we're going to pause here for a moment and talk about this fourth type of toxic behavior. One of the things that all of these different toxic behaviors we've been talking about have in common is that they are all forms of manipulation and control. What happens is oftentimes we see these toxic behaviors in people or even in ourselves because we want to manipulate or we want to control, because we want to avoid doing our own work. So we end up controlling others instead of taking control of ourselves. And it's all rooted in toxic behaviors. And I want to remind you, it's not really necessarily when you make a mistake, because we've all made mistakes. Toxic behaviors are seen in people that don't take responsibility. You don't see the changes. You see the cycles, but you don't necessarily see the changes. It's a continual pattern. It's really an issue of motive. And when you start to see and recognize these toxic behaviors, whether in yourself or in other people, then you stop letting them manipulate you, or you stop letting them control you. And that's very important, because you remove yourself from that toxicity, or you stopped manipulating, or you stop controlling, because that's toxic behavior towards other people. So we talked about manipulation. And we also talked about gaslighting, constant criticism. And I want to talk about this last one today, and it's called triangulation. Triangulation, it's a type of toxic behavior that is very damaging. And triangulation is when somebody tries to pull you into the middle of a conflict. There's a conflict between maybe two people, but they try to pull you into their own conflict. Instead of working with the person involved directly, they vent to you. Maybe you're the type of person that vents to others about somebody else instead of addressing it to them. That's triangulation. In other words, they will tell you, but it's really not your place. It's really an issue between them and somebody else. Sometimes parents can do this. They involve their kids, and they try to pin the husband or the wife. They try to pin each other against the kids, or they'll talk to the kids about one spouse. And it's triangulation. It's really not the issue of the kids. That's an issue between the parents. But mom will talk about dad with kids, or dad will talk about mom with kids, or the kids will talk about mom with dad. That's called triangulation. It happens in friendships as well. When you see triangulation, that third person whom was told this story between a conflict between two people is really like a person who's left carrying a suitcase full of garbage, full of burdens that's really not theirs. Has anybody ever tried to come to you and talk to you about somebody else when they should have approached that person themselves? But now you're left carrying a garbage that's not yours. And this is dangerous. It's very dangerous, because that third person, that person that shares things with you about somebody else, you're left feeling anxious or guilty or bad, or you're in the middle of a conflict that's not even yours. In other words, they involve you into a conflict. They vent. They try to tell you, oh, so-and-so did such and such. And rather than speaking to them directly, they don't. They're venting to you. And that's called triangulation. In other words, you're being viewed as a mediator. You're being viewed as a garbage dump instead of you as an individual and your own person. And oftentimes when people are empathetic, they get in the middle of people's problems. They're empathetic. They want to help. And that sometimes gets us into the middle of other people's situations. There are healthy ways to seek third-party counsel. There are healthy ways to get advice, and there are healthy ways to get wisdom. I think of the story of Martha and Mary. This is a story in Luke 10:38. And here we see that Martha is just busy. She cleans the house and she's so busy and she's tidying it up. While Mary is quiet. Mary is a worshiper. She's at the feet of Jesus. And Martha is upset. She's upset at Mary because she's not doing what, in her eyes, she's supposed to be doing. Martha is like, hey, you should be helping me out. You should be helping me around the house. This is triangulation. And what does Martha do? She goes to Jesus to vent. Now, we don't know if Martha did this often, right? We don't know the backstory. But we do know that this is an example of triangulation because instead of going to Mary, instead of Martha approaching Mary and saying, hey, let's work something out. I've been cleaning all day. Can you give me a hand? No, she goes instead to Jesus. And she starts to vent to Jesus. Hey, Martha's left me to do all the work. She begins to gripe. She begins to complain to Jesus. That's triangulation. And you see it in family. Somebody in the family, maybe a sister calling another sister about another sister, or a brother. Or you see someone in the family that's calling another family member, talking about a family member. Well, Jesus is a perfect example about setting boundaries. He says to Martha, Mary made a really good choice, and I'm good with her choice. Now, what's to say your choice is better, Martha? He doesn't tell Martha, you're right, Mary should help you. Jesus was a master at setting boundaries from any toxic behavior. And this starts with ourselves. Do you have any of these toxic behaviors? Triangulation because you're afraid to talk to people? Or you're not good at receiving other people's boundaries? You need to be aware. That's key to be healthy, to recognize that these are toxic behaviors within yourself. Be honest with yourself. Maybe if you see somebody who's doing it to you, be aware. And you don't necessarily have to stay and listen to that garbage. You can actually stop. Set some boundaries. I think it would be wise if you go speak to the person yourself. Have you tried talking to that individual rather than venting with me? Moving towards health is so much better. And that requires boundaries, word boundaries, action boundaries. You're not trying to get other people to change because you're never going to get people to change. We don't have that much power to change people. What we want to do is we want to recognize toxic behaviors. But it doesn't just happen. Our goal is to make sure we see it in ourselves first. And then we can identify it in others. And now we can be and take effective action to remove toxicity from our lives. We're not trying to change other people. They may not want to change. What we're trying to do is remove ourselves from many harmful types of behavior that can bring grief to us. I think it's important for us to acknowledge it and know how to take action in words. We could say things like, I value our relationship, but I notice that this conversation tends to veer towards this family member, and this is triangulation, and all it's doing is causing anxiety towards me. And then get off the phone with them. That's important. That's the best gift you can give yourself, to remove yourself from any toxic behavior. These are brave actions. And brave actions lead us towards a healthier us. And if they don't want to change, then respect that. We respect the fact that they don't want to change. But they also have to respect the fact that we choose to change.